Hi, everyone, and welcome to Scale and Secure Your Backups with the Veeam Data Cloud. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. I am Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am just super excited to be your moderator for this special event. But before we get to what I'm sure is going to be a fantastic discussion, I need to cover some housekeeping items. Now, the first thing to know is that we want your questions. Just drop them in the questions box in your webinar control panel for our experts. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues that you have. If that doesn't work, they'll let us know in the Q&A, and we will provide further technical assistance, hopefully. Okay. Second, take a look at the handout section of your webinar control panel. That is right next to the questions tab there. In the handout section, you will find a number of great resources, including some must-haves from Veeam. And they are the Veeam 2024 Trends Report. Now, that sucker is chock full of great information and insights, so make sure you download it today. Also from Veeam in the handout section, you will find a PDF that provides an overview of the Veeam Data Cloud and a link to the VDC from Microsoft 365 overview. What a great lineup of resources, huh? Now, there you'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events just like this one. Definitely check that out. And if you see something you like, sign up. Okay. Third, at the end of this webinar today, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you have to be in attendance during the entire event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find it there. And it's really boring, but if you're like need a nap or something like that, that might be something to read over right now. And since we love your questions, we are today going to encourage them with an additional prize during the event. We're giving away another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question we get during the webinar. So at the end of the event, we're going to pick out the best one that comes in, and that attendee will win the card. In other words, it literally pays to ask questions. And with that, folks, why don't we get to the main event? Our presenters from Veeam are Corinne Bessette and Johan Hutenga, and they are going to take the lead on a great discussion. Let's bring them on right now. And it looks like they are ready to go. Folks, you ready to dive into it?
For sure. Right.
Outstanding. Then I am going to hop out of here and hand you guys the virtual mic. There you go.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Ren, do you want to take it away? I think your audio is still out, but I'm not sure if that's me or you. There we go.
Is that better? Perfect. So just as an initial introduction, I am Corinne Bessette. I'm on the product strategy side here at Veeam. And Johan?
Yeah, I am Johan Hutenga, and I look after the Veeam and Microsoft technical relationship for R&D.
Perfect. So we're here to talk about the newer addition to our portfolio, which is the Veeam Data Cloud, and how this can kind of scale your environment to meet most of the needs for backup without needing to worry about the underlying infrastructure. Now, it's really important to start off with that we worked very closely with Microsoft within our Microsoft relationship in order to cultivate the software and make sure it's the right technology. Do you want to take that away for us?
Yeah, so we've had this product for quite a few years, right? And the growth of it has been astronomical. We have 18 million users protected. And of course, that means we work very closely with Microsoft at this point to make sure that we're doing the right things for our customer base. If you think about this from a perspective, we'll talk about this later, M365 is a backup necessary. Microsoft has announced their own things there as well. We're integrating with some of those things. We can ask some questions about that later. But there's a lot of relationship that makes this work. So we visit Microsoft, we have lots of conversations between different PM teams, make sure that we are a good partner and we follow all the right paradigms around this. You can see we're certified for Microsoft Teams, for example. We use the Teams Export API. There's a lot more there, but that's kind of my part of the job. And then Rin, you have a lot of the evangelism around this as well that you look after. So, yeah.
Right. So I actually do a lot out in the community and community relations. Pretty much if you name a major event out there for the Microsoft community, you'll probably find me there either participating or even presenting in some of the agnostic infrastructure sections for Microsoft 365 backend, which is my specialty on this side. But we cultivate both a public and a private relationship with Microsoft to make sure we are completely in line with that business partner and key factors. In fact, we have some stuff that we can't really talk about right now that are coming out imminently for some of the relationships and advancements, especially around, are we allowed to say around AI? It just sounded
Yeah,
around
we
AI.
say AI, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the shared responsibility model, I think, is the pinnacle of starting when we're looking at the conversation of the Microsoft 365 environments, because even though it still seems to be a slight misconception after explaining and going through, but breaking down what Microsoft defines the privilege separation is for between the user and the Microsoft 365 relationship. What this means is that, yes, they do take care of the application layer. They take care of the underlying networking. Yes, they take care of the offering of security and having access to a domain in order to authenticate too. But anything that comes in through the front door of that authentication process is within the user to lock down, make sure no one's getting in. And any damage caused coming in through the front door is 100% within the customer's domain to make sure nothing happens, they have backups, or they have certain retention policies within the Microsoft 365 environment. And even though this isn't really a new technology, we're still finding every day there's new rules and regulations that are coming out there for governance and compliance. And they generally follow large and massive amounts of data loss for these different environments, and then needing to still stretch out that domain of protection to the end users and to the companies.
I think this is definitely one of those points that gets discussed a lot, right? But you see this even on the Microsoft documentation pages, right? There are things that the service is very good at, and M365 is hugely popular. And then there are things that you go, okay, I did certain things the way that I did when I had Exchange on premises, and my legal team, my compliance team has those rules still. So those things stay the same.
So we actually got a really good question here in chat, and it's, what are the key challenges organizations face when it comes to scaling their backup infrastructure? And thank you, Adam, for that question. And we will talk a little bit more about this concept as a whole, but more specifically, when you move data to Microsoft 365, it's always easy to kind of scale out your Exchange and your Exchange backend because you can't send more than a 10 meg file. So you have a pretty consistent data growth, even if you're sending maximum file allotments. But when you start getting into Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive, you can have a literal overnight explosion of data that just expands into that environment when the adoption picks up. And now you have to figure out how to protect it if you have SharePoint sites that are shared, if they're still active or if they're not active, because most people don't understand if you have a SharePoint site, you do still have a set limitation on data. And then everything over the set limitation that you've paid for and is additional 20 cents per gigabyte every month for that data that lives on that infrastructure. So understanding how much the cost is, how much you need to archive, and giving people ideas of what they should and should not be putting on work domains, because there's a lot of intellectual property there that still needs to come into those protection sides. Do you have anything to add for scalability concerns that someone might run into for backup?
Yeah, well, obviously, if everybody's going to store their recorded videos on there, that's going to change how SharePoint is adopted. SharePoint adoption, I think, is growing by hundreds of petabytes a month. Microsoft has published some numbers there. It's astronomical. And so, I mean, as a business, you probably are going to be consuming it as well. So making sure that you're protecting the right data set's important. Choosing wisely with what you do, like you can choose different storage tiers as well for different things in certain cases. And then the long tail of that, like in 5, 6, 7 years, how will you be able to restore that? Or if you get an email or a question from somebody important, like, did somebody steal from the company? Did somebody make a mistake a few years ago? That kind of stuff is something you can prevent in the initial years. But if you're having to talk about this from a longer journey perspective, that data might best live in an external backup that's on cheap storage, for example.
Great explanation. Now, we alluded to in the beginning of this presentation that there are assets available for you to download, including the data protection report. The data protection report, it's important to note this is actually an agnostic report that we just help fund out in the community and help cultivate some of the information and questions. The person that runs that on our side is a industry analyst in their previous life before coming to work and help us out with these scenarios. So the data is as unbiased as data can be out there, and we ask people, what kind of data loss have you experienced, where do you see vulnerabilities, and what was your recovery story after something had happened? And there were some very terrifying numbers, to the point that we actually made a second report called our ransomware trends report, which was just people out there that have had ransomware attacks and what type of recovery that they had been involved in. What were the pain points? What did they not expect? And how were they able to then recover or not be able to recover in certain scenarios? And the first number we have here is around vulnerabilities. Now, this is another agnostic report out in the community from a security provider that said about 80% of attacks are coming in through the system on something Microsoft 365 data or Microsoft data oriented, which is a huge attack zone just based off of, I know our organization and many other organizations, they might not be Microsoft only houses, but they are Microsoft heavy houses.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's one of those places where we're collaborating on it, right? So it's probably a place where you get phished more often. It's probably the first point of entry into an organization in many places. So yeah, 80% is scary though. Like that's higher than I wanted to see. I think it's interesting. The team does a really good job with these reports, and you have to keep in mind it's done on a data set that's not just Veeam customers. That helps, because otherwise it looks a little more scary. And it's like, okay, so there's a lot of individual answers to these questions that really give insight as to, I guess I really should look after this stuff better. And this 100% recovery, like, what does that even mean? I don't know. Like, do you have to recover your whole tenant back to a previous point in time? I hope that we detect the ransomware or malware before that ever happens. Hopefully that's never necessary, right?
So even beyond just restoring back to original location, this is saying that less than 25% of people were able to recover 100% of their data. So we have these organizations out there that are sending out malware attacks, ransomware attacks, and then Robin Hood types of attacks, which either exfiltrate, corrupt existing data, or they're just gathering information from your organization. And they could just be some kid sitting out there getting his script kiddie life on and saying, okay, I want to make this ransomware and I'm going to get rich quick. Now, you're trusting his coding skills in order to then decrypt your data. He got his money already. He doesn't even really care if that data is able to be decrypted on your side. And that's where we're seeing a majority of this is they can't recover all of their data because A, it's too slow. It was bad coding made for the decryption software, or something extremely silly like this that just makes it an even more detrimental situations to businesses trying to survive in this kind of security and threat landscape.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's funny how that works. The questions we're getting about scaling are really cool. I think we'll talk a little bit more about Veeam Data Cloud in a second. And like, how does this work and what organization sizes are they for? Everybody's trying to win this best question prize already. So
they're great questions. So we're going to go a little bit more into what is backup as a service. We have had an on-premises or physical machine-oriented software for a long time that backs up the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 scenarios. But our recent rendition is going into backup as a service. And we've seen a lot of as a services, and sometimes your brain starts to spin because they start using similar acronyms. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to have backup as a service And this will probably answer a lot of your scale questions and the fact that it really doesn't matter to you. If you're doing a true backup as a service, the backend infrastructure is being taken care of, the network's being taken care of, the storage is being taken care of, and the authentication portals are being all taken care of. So you just kind of have to set it up, say, hey, this is going to be your point of access to my data. We're going to back it up. We're going to take care of the storage cost per user base. And then you just come whenever you need to do a restore scenario to the self-service restore portals. Do you have to add to that?
I think the flat rate thing is really cool. And then figuring out, the fact that you no longer have to worry that much is like, okay, I want to protect all this data. You figure it out. I know Veeam has been a very popular product, probably the #1 market leader in this space, but the idea that you don't have to worry about that infrastructure component is a big deal. And there were other questions about SLAs and stuff, so we can probably get to that. But of course, there are still things like throttling inside M365. This isn't instant necessarily, right? You still have to wait for your backup jobs to complete, but all of that's handled for you.
Well put. And we will go a little bit more into the product as a whole, but first, talking about like the modern way that you should be looking at these backup as a service products. We get into new technologies and we think, okay, we know how this works, but what we should expect and the questions that we should be asking. And one of the biggest things that I see out there is it intuitive? Could I give this to someone with relatively intuitive technical skills, has no specialty in this platform, and be able to get back? Because for all we know, we could have an insider threat, or someone's on some type of leave and they're no longer able to restore data during that time because they're down in the Caribbean living their best life, and your entire infrastructure's down. Can someone get in there and be able to pick up and learn quickly? And we've been talking about SLA, but do you have any more to add to the SLA from what someone should expect from a product?
Yeah, I think it's nice to be able to say, hey, I make a backup and I can see it start and running within a time frame that is reasonable, right? Time to watch a short movie, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Of course, if you have a huge organization, there are caveats to all these things, but it's nice to have everything configured and ready within that little bit of time. And then when it comes to recovery, I think you really should think about this from a protection unit idea, like you'd be recovering individual items potentially. I think we'll get a demo at the end too, so I'm looking forward to that, which will kind of show how fast that might be as well.
Perfect. And knowing that you're taking a software as a service over to a backup as a service to try to gain more control, you want to think about what options are offered for where your data is going to sit, because GDPR is not the only compliance metric out there for data sovereignty. They're all over the place now. And where does your management domains flow through? So not just where does your data live, but if you have to recover that data, is it going to bounce you into a region that puts you out of compliance? Having some say into where your data gets stored and how it gets stored is going to be pertinent to getting past that layer of just software as a service, gaining back control to backup as a service, and having that control with the backup as a service. And without too much further, we have Veeam Data Cloud. And I believe we have that here, and we actually have two services that are offered on the Veeam Data Cloud. First of all, we have the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. We've been talking about software as a service, but we also cover the Azure products, so the IaaS and PaaS within the system. And you are still responsible for anything that walks in through the front door for those data types, as well as if you have any compliance or regulations about keeping that data for any period of time.
Yeah, there were some questions about future service types. I think we can't get into that yet, but you can imagine how this might work, right? And the other question I got was, what about on-premises data? Well, the other products haven't gone away, so you can still use those.
Excellent points. And yes, the answer is yes, there are more things coming. Can we talk about it? No, but I would hint anyone that's looking for future data to check out Veeam On. So Veeam.com is our event. It happens the first week of June, and there will be a ton of announcements that I just got out of meetings for today for things that we're going to be showing on live stage and features that are going to be coming to you very shortly. So definitely check that out for any insider knowledge. And the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 portion of the product. When we're looking at being able to do this, we want to make sure that we have a secure environment. We have granular permission controls that you can assign out to individual users, meaning they don't just have administration to create jobs, delete jobs, change schedules, but you could give them access to only do restores. And it could be restores over OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, whatever is needed for their job scope. The bonus is they don't need to have extra privileges in the Microsoft 365 environment. So you do not need to be a SharePoint admin. You don't need to be a global admin. You don't need to be any administrative role at all inside of Microsoft 365 in order to get data back, in order to do your job. Anything to add to that one?
No, I think I like that feature a lot. I'm looking forward to less help desk questions, right? People can do it themselves. So I think it's nice about this is you notice everything's included as well. Of course, I mean, there are caveats around fair use, but the idea is that it's a flat fixed fee should make it nice and easy to plan for as well.
Excellent. And about the Azure environment, pivoting the conversation a little is Microsoft Azure does have what they call a backup. Now, the backup on the Microsoft Azure side does everything to a hot or active storage type, which means you're going to have snapshots of that data that live in live production data. And I don't know if anyone out there is also in charge of the bill in their environment, but anything that lives on active data is 10 to 20 times the cost as an object storage to offload that data to keep it for compliance reasons or even for recovery in certain situations. We have a recovery and ROI calculators built into the software. The calculators will let you know how much it would cost to run off a snapshot, sending it to an archival storage, and even replication situations if you want to do in-region or cross-region replication, including the estimated cost for how to move that, or what it's going to cost to move data between those regions.
Yeah.
Most people don't know is even though you're still on the Azure environment or within the Azure backbone, if you leave a region and go to another region with Azure data, it is going to cost you ingress and egress costs on both sides. So that's something to keep in mind in those scenarios.
I think what's cool about this one as well is that you have a central control plane for all of this. So Veeam Backup and Replication traditionally was able to link into Veeam Backup for Azure, right? Now you don't have to worry about that anymore. The Veeam Data Cloud piece can just handle that for you. You just have one web interface. And what happens is because we are locality-wise, we're going to be in the same Azure region as you, right? We'll be able to back up your data. And it's a very nice, simple process.
Excellent. This particular product will also be for cloud-only installations at this time. There won't be a hybrid element. This is really taking over the scenario where you don't really have an on-premises foothold or you don't want to manage your own orchestrated infrastructure with dealing in the software as a service infrastructure of Microsoft, and you want to take some of that load off your IT department so they can get back to kind of more important tasks for their day-to-day rather than making sure these components are up and running and separating those privileged zones. This is as close as you can get with staying cloud only, but still having a data privilege separation that gives you confidence that it's not going to be compromised in some sort of attack and pivot through into these types of backups. All right. And do we have a couple questions we want to take before the demo?
I think it was about hybrid exchange, right? That's an interesting one. The mailboxes that live on your on-premises Exchange server, you might use a traditional Veeam tool for, but everything that's already inside M365, you could protect this way. And I guess we'll get the demo for that now, huh?
All right. Let's see here, and let me know when you're able to see the screen.
Very good on my side.
Perfect. So this is the Veeam Data Cloud console. When you first log into the console, something that you don't get from the native software is this entire overview and status window of not just your Veeam backups, but your infrastructure itself. It'll show you how many users you have, including active or inactive users. The inactive users could be a way to look into if someone has accounts that haven't been decommissioned, if you have something of administrative accounts that you haven't locked down, or if you've had maybe in and out contractors in your organization, maybe some of those accounts didn't get cleaned up. And all of these could be taking up license that you may not need in your organization. We also have over here, if you have a storage explosion overnight, you can see who is using the storage in your organization. They may be using the SharePoint data in your organization and could occur costs if they're going over, in most cases, that 1 terabyte of SharePoint data that each person is assigned. We can also see the type of retention and whether or not we're on target for those different types of retention. Over here, we have the ability to back up the entire organization or create individual jobs if you're not wanting to back up the entire organization. You can create a new job. It simply just needs a name and then a scope. Now, the scope could be the entire organization again, or you can do individual groups, users, and list of users. So you can upload a the file here that has a list of users that you do want to include inside the backup, and it'll continue to pull from that same list of users or objects in order to run that backup cycle. The schedule allows you to get as granular down to 4 hours. Now this will continue to kick off every job run. If it takes 3 hours and 49 minutes, the next job will kick off another 20 minutes later. So you'll continuously have jobs coming into your organization. Now, if you're familiar with the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 product, it should look very familiar with this file structure in the backup and restore scenarios. So we see the list of mailboxes here. We see the group mailboxes, we see the individual mailboxes, and the mailboxes created by teams, so Microsoft Teams in the organization, which you might share files with. And we can take a look at anything within that user, including individual tasks and their notes for the restoration purposes. If we need to restore multiple items, we can select them from this list and restore back to the original location, or recover to a compared to a production environment. If you're looking at a large list of emails or OneDrive or any type of data in your organization, and you just want to restore or see what's changed, you can use this. It'll take whatever's within the backup, then compare it to the production environment and show you just what the differences are here. OneDrive looks much the same, except we'll be looking at files and folders for the organization. So we can come into this particular folder and see what type of file it is, as well as the name of those files. And if there's multiple versions of that file, you can restore back to a previous version of that file. SharePoint is much the same look and feel, but we're going to be seeing more of the documents, lists, and libraries that you'll see on the SharePoint side, including those subsites and the content within those subsites that you may have or have listed documents for the different teams. Inside of Microsoft Teams, we see more of the channels and tabs. If you have other tabs, like we have the fill for the class quizzes, you can restore back the reference links to these different backend resources in case a tab was removed and it needs to be brought back to the production side. Did you have anything to add for this portion of the restore console, Johan?
No, I think it's really cool to see how much it looks the same as what we've had before, right? And how simple it is to use. I think it's also really nice, the role-based access that we'll get to in a minute, how that kind of makes that easy to limit access to specific users here and simplify restore so that you don't have to do it yourself. And I know there were questions around scaling and speed and stuff like that, but because the proxies that do the work behind the scenes, that if you think about the traditional product, they're all deployed sort of automatically, right? You don't have to deal with that. So a lot of the configuration work goes away for you. You do have to give it access to your organization, of course, to access the data before it gets in here. And that can be interesting as well because Teams has a billing component, so that gets a bit more complicated. But that's just part of how Teams backup works for anybody.
Perfect. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at a restore, and we'll actually restore something from the OneDrive side. And we'll pick on one of the users that has a lot of data here. And it looks like we even have insights from last year's Veeam On within folders, and we have a bunch of video files. So we'll try to restore one of these, and you can see you can either download that locally to this computer. So if you have a need to move it somewhere else or attach it, you can do that with a local download. And for the larger objects, we have this here, so it'll download in the background, just like anything else that you download from inside of a browser. It goes to your download folders and you can use it from there. In this case, we'll restore back to the original location, and that's it. And we'll be notified once that's complete. Next, as Johan alluded to, we have a lot of roles and permissions that we can assign to other users. And we can add a new role here, and you can either create from a template or make a custom role. And here we have the options to be able to general permissions, which are more around viewing those reports. Then the backup side, if you want them to be able to manage backup jobs, you can do that from here. Any type of granular restore options for SharePoint and Exchange. Then you have more of the administrative side if you're going to do anything with managing the subscription, the system settings, or the license information here. And one of my other favorite features within this is actually the create a ticket. And this will automatically log a ticket from your support information on the back end, and you can pull over your logs and whatever else you might need in order to create one of those tickets. And the portal's really that easy. This home screen here will give you all of the insights to your backups, all of the restore or job creation statistics that may have happened within your console, and notify you anytime something's been complete within your notification settings here. And it's that easy.
Oh, that's an awesome demo. Let's see if we have some more questions as well. We look at this.
Pointing out the assets that we have listed within the cast here are the overview for VDC overview. That actually takes you to a step-by-step walkthrough of a lot of what we just viewed in the console, and you can share that out with anyone or look at it yourself, and it also gives explanation of what each of the settings are within the console.
Yeah, we got a question around disaster recovery planning as well, which is an interesting one. It's not necessarily like the main focus of this tool, right? This tool is about data protection in general, whereas disaster recovery is almost like a business skill, like a business practice. So I think what needs to happen if you were to think about this from that perspective, and you had that person in the Caribbean on vacation, right, as earlier, you need to have a list of people you can call when something goes wrong, or you need to make sure that the users have the ability to restore their own data. M365, of course, is cloud-based, so if you have remote workers and you have people on their own laptops, they could continue working if M365 is still up, or if you need to restore their data, then you could tell them when the restore will take place and sort of game plan this thing, right? That's the next level beyond this, is making sure you have a game plan for when something does go wrong.
That's an excellent addition. And we actually have a lot of questions about future features. Right now, it is just about the Microsoft 365 and Azure conversation. In the future, we have other release models coming out, as well as additions to the specific model that will meet a lot of these needs. Unfortunately, we are both under heavy embargo on a lot of that information. So if there's any other questions that are about the current sets of features, we would love to get those into the chat before the end and be able to answer those. Also, if you want to try out or get involved with the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 or Veeam Data Cloud, getting in contact with our sales team can help you walk through exactly what you'd need and what it would look like for your organization to complete these steps. There are also discounts on top of the monthly users for buying ahead of time for a year.
Yeah, and there are some preview builds of different things, but the SaaS offerings, most SaaS offerings are pay to play usually because of the compute involved to run them. It's a bit different than bringing your own server to the equation, right? But that depends. So if we talk about granular recovery and versioning, we looked at emails, documents, and collaboration like Teams, right? We looked at that as part of the demo, and that is all included in the base builds, right? So I think that we got a question about how that might work from that perspective. And then if you have a large environment, you may end up making sure that you talk to those salespeople and explain, this is my need, this is how many customers I have. And then maybe they can give you some information around scaling. Because honestly, you shouldn't have to worry about that anymore, but they can explain a little bit more in the back end as to how that actually works if that's necessary.
Excellent. And we actually do have another question here about the current offering in its regard to egress fees. There are no egress fees with getting the data out of our side to the cloud environment for the current offering today.
It is subject to fair use. So if you go crazy, but otherwise, no.
I don't know about you. Are you seeing any other questions that are sticking out here in the chat for us?
Not at the moment, but I do hope that somebody gets that $50 Amazon gift card and buys a Microsoft thing with it, right? I have to remember that part.
All right. And that would be the end of our section. Keith?
Hey, thanks so much, everyone. What a great presentation from both of you. I loved the demo. Always love demos. The more in depth, the better, and seeing how all that works. I also appreciate that one of the people there at Veeam who you restored from was my old buddy Rick Vanover.
He's also my boss.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yes.
I was his editor for a long time, actually, way back when. So Rick and I go back a long way, and he's just great to work with. So thank you so much for that. The Q&A was rocking. I got a couple of more questions here, and then I think we can start to wrap it up. So here's one that looks good. Do Microsoft 365 backup policies have dynamically updating job scopes?
That's a good question. So yes and no. In the current product, we leverage dynamic groups and things like that. You can configure an Active Directory. But we understand that you might want that to be more than that. So stay tuned, I guess, is the answer. But in the immediate future, there are multiple ways to achieve this with group types. And that's typically how this is done.
Okay. I don't know if this, again, touches on future product releases or not, but someone did ask a question about AI. So can you speak in general terms about how much AI, if any, AI/ML is integrated right now with backup solutions, or can you sneak preview it and say, well, it might be coming in future releases? So basically, can you say anything about that at this point?
So we actually do have a press release out there. We can't really speak beyond the press release, but we did engage in a relationship with Microsoft in order to do AI development with them, involving the Copilot project. So we're very excited about that. And anything that you can find public is the only thing that we're going to be able to talk about on this webinar.
I can also talk about our past work in AI. So that's the other thing I can do, because that's available already. And if you think about Veeam 1, I don't know, obviously that's a very different product. It's monitoring. What we do is we use the support data that we receive from you on any support case, and we anonymize it and group it into things and use it for learning. So then those definition files go back to your machine and can be used. And there's one other place, but Rin, go for it.
With consent.
Well, of course.
We use the data with the consent for customers that have consented for the data usage.
Yes, thank you.
Clarify that.
Yeah, that would be a problem otherwise. The other thing that we do is that we have some additional, like if you look at Veeam Backup and Replication, there's that chatbot in the corner that you can use in 12.1, and it allows you to interact with like help documentation and stuff like that. You can imagine where this could go, but unfortunately, the press release is all we can go on right now.
Yeah, so the Veeam Backup and Replication, the 12.1 release, that does have the AI in it. Some things that I personally think would be cool is asking it questions like, I wonder how I create a sure backup job, and a wizard automatically pops up for being able to create that. Is this
not
smart?
that anything like that might
that.
be coming or anything, right?
That's
right.
what I would like to see in the product.
That would be cool.
Right.
That
Is this a
would be
feature request? Yeah. So
that's called eating your own dog food, right? You take these from your employees and implement them. Okay, I think we got time for one more here today before we let you go. And this is more of a philosophical question. So it is, how do I know if backup as a service is right for my organization?
oh, that could take another hour. So that depends very much on how you're used to doing things. Like if you're used to running a lot of things as a service, and you are in a situation now where you're moving stuff to cloud or wondering about how much infrastructure you're keeping, maybe that's a good fit. If you like being in control of everything, you like your servers to be pets, not cattle, then maybe you like your backup infrastructure to be in somewhere you can touch. And you can deploy those even in a cloud marketplace today, even if they're not SaaS. Remember, our products will work there as well. So it's very much a discussion as to where your core expertise should be and how that fits for you as an organization.
I think that's an excellent line. It really is all dependent on the organization. Do you want to be more hands off? Do you have the place to put the data? Do you have the expertise in-house to place that data? We see sometimes even large tech companies would rather have as a service because the ROI on an as a service is much better than producing one of their technical expertise to putting onto a project that could be better handled as a return on cost type of scenario.
I think there's one more factor to consider here, too, and that is every admin hates messing with backups. I mean, it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is. Everybody hates it. So for me, that's a pretty darn good reason right there to say, hey, let Veeam do it. I just don't feel like the headaches. Even if I could, I would just rather offload that hideous chore to them. So I think that may be almost a rhetorical question in some ways. So Corinne and Johan, has been such a delight to have you on today. I want to thank you for your presentation, for the great demo, for the Q&A insights. And just for educating us on what Veeam is doing right now and where it is going in the future. It is always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, folks, that was a lot of fun. And that takes us to near the end of this event today. But before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business to take care of, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. As I said at the beginning, you have to be present for the entire event to be eligible to win, and we have chosen that winner for this event, and that winner is Jamie McGuire from North Dakota. Congratulations, Jamie. Way to go. We will be in touch ASAP to get you your card. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible, and a special thanks to Corinne and Johan, who are just fantastic in this, and great speakers, entertaining and engaging. And it is always fun to have them join us and update us on what Veeam is doing. Such an innovative company. And thanks to you, the attendees, as always, for being here, for spending part of your day with us. I love being on with you and appreciate your attendance here today and for your great questions. And there were many of them. This is a topic that obviously is near and dear to many hearts. So with that, we are out of here, folks. That concludes the event. Have a great rest of your day.